Discord is giving me an advert for SpongeBob SquarePants.
Eh?
He is a
Cool.
pineapple under the
legend.
sea.
He lives in a pineapple under the sea.
Well,
The marketing is clearly working brilliantly amongst the PC Pro podcast.
Absolutely. Surprised I normally shout it out when anyone mentions SpongeBob SquarePants.
I should think so.
Does anyone remember Compost Corner on Tiswas? It has the same effect on me.
Oh yeah, no, that's going back a little bit.
We were in a garden centre at Christmas to see Santa, and they put a sign up saying Compost Corner. And I just stood there and shouted Compost Corner and realised I was the only person. No, never mind. These things happen. Why is there a drinks cabinet in Discord?
Don't know.
Retro Owl is sharing, what is this, mostly gin. In fact, is it entirely gin?
Looks like a lot of gin.
That is a lot of gin.
Lin gin.
Lin
No,
gin.
Lin gin's one of them.
Lindrum. I'm trying to copy the image so I can enhance, but for some reason...
I don't like gin. I mean, I can drink a gin and tonic, but they do strange things to me.
Yeah, it's not good for me.
With your arm up your back, Barry, you'll pass a gin, will you?
Yeah, I mean, if I've got to.
If you can.
Manly Spirits, Edinburgh Gin, St Andrews, Neptune Gin. Bit of a Scottish theme here.
Did you say Manly Spirit?
Yeah, Manly Spirits Australian Dry Gin is one of the ones there in
God's
the...
sake.
Yeah.
What do you wear it behind your ear?
Absolutely.
There's California gin in there as well.
Shouldn't give a calf of wine for
Orkney
it or
and
anything
Shetland.
else.
Orkney, Shetland, Highlands.
Gins of the world.
Can't quite read that Lusser one behind it. An adventure in gin. God.
Oh, do we have a sponsor?
Yeah, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Excellent.
Chai spiced Scottish gin, pineapple, coconut, and passion fruit gin, gunshot infused gin. What?
Oh, yeah.
I presume gunshot means something other than what I think it does.
I think there's bits of lead in the bottom of the bottle.
Well,
Yeah. Pellets.
Half
I
a
don't
dead
s-
pheasant
I,
in it.
I don't see any Old Tom though.
Sorry.
Old Tom, it's a style of
Black
gin
Coat.
that. No.
Oh, it'd be great though if the what was it called? The gunshot, like, you know, one shot to the head is all it takes. Headshot.
That's it.
Yeah.
Boom.
Watch for that on their Christmas marketing roast. There'll be after.
I think
Big
even
royalties.
in the 70s they may have drawn a line on that line. I don't think you get away with it these days.
To come at me to any gin distilleries listening out there. We're a big fan.
The natural home of the gin industry, the PC Pro podcast.
Yeah.
The only use I ever had for gin was cleaning tape heads so I could get my my bootleg Commodore 64 games to load.
Clean tape heads with gin.
Yeah.
Alive.
There was a chap at what was it? Was it Tech Radar or something? I think called Dave James, which I think is a sounds a bit like a die roll name, but I think that was him. And I got chatting to him once at an event, and I think they were serving us gin, and he said he couldn't drink gin because one time when he was a broke student, all he had in the house to drink was gin, and he didn't have any kind of mixer. And so, having like searched high and low, the closest thing he could find to a mixer was tomato soup. So he invented
Oh,
it.
God. No.
And surprisingly enough, that ruined it for forever. So.
Yeah.
Sambuca. Can't even whiff it. One night.
God,
all it took.
no.
One night on the tiles after a bottle of Sambuca.
Stuart Turton must have left us 12 years ago, and I
Yeah.
still can't taste Sambuca
No.
without.
No, I'm the same with Budweiser. I mean, I don't drink anyway, but the smell of it just brings back, those junior beer days from when you were a young teenager. And
Junior beer. Yeah.
Surprised you can get a smell at all from it. It's just water, basically.
Yeah. Have you ever had hooligan soup?
Hooligan soup. That sounds like an Irish thing.
Oh my God. It's actually a Devon thing.
Oh, is it? Oh,
It's partly, yeah, but it's half a Guinness with half a cider and a blackcurrant top.
No, thank you.
Okay.
No, don't do it.
Because
Don't
Guinness
do
and black, I know. So okay, it makes sort of sense. What you got hooligan stew. Soup.
Hooligan soup.
I always like to imagine the people just turn up sometimes in Discord without listening to the preamble, and all they're seeing there is a conversation about gin and Pimm's and what the hell's going on.
this gold is live on YouTube for all time. So
I was.
Oh no, are we live on YouTube now?
Yeah, have been for.
Oh, heads up, people.
Did I not? If you read your Slack messages.
Oh yes. Oh.
Well, Yeah, once the talent scouts come across our alcohol podcast, we've got a spin-off.
Yeah. Own goal.
We
Come
used
on.
to
Where's
we
Gary
used to
Lineker?
review alcoholic drinks every
The rest-
Friday afternoon after.
Yeah, we did.
Well,
That's true.
Yeah, happy days. Right.
Yeah.
8 seconds to curtain, Miss Piggy.
Okay. Oh, broken a nail. That's a bad time, isn't it?
Quick, cancel the show.
And it's 1 o'clock.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the PC Pro podcast. It is Thursday, the 1st of August, and I am Barry Collins, features editor of that magazine thing we do called PC Pro. And with me today, I have Lee Grant.
Good afternoon.
I have Darian Graham Smith.
Hello there.
And I have Rosh Nahuma.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. And we are starting this week with you, Darian, and this Intel chip problem keeps rumbling on.
Yeah, so we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It was discovered that Intel's 13th and 14th generation CPUs were becoming a bit crashy. I seem to recall we had to be a bit careful about what we alleged, but Intel has confirmed that there is a known problem with these most recent generations of desktop CPUs. And I think it was on Monday of this week, Intel announced it was going to release a patch, a microcode update coming out during this month, which should hopefully prevent the problems which have been manifesting. Unfortunately, a couple of follow-up interviews, people have been asking Intel to explain a bit more about what's gone wrong and what the patch is going to do. It does seem that it is to do with bits of the chip getting damaged by excessively high voltages when they're pushed hard. And if your chip has already become crashy, if it's succumbed to overvolting damage, then this patch isn't going to fix that. Your processor is irreversibly broken. So what's Intel going to do about this for people already afflicted? Well, it's early days, but so far, when they were asked if they were going to immediately stop sales of the affected processors, they said no. When asked if they were going to do a recall, they said no. When asked if they were going to extend warranties to cover any chips that might go wrong, they haven't yet confirmed one way or another. So this is a little bit concerning. As part of the... Excuse me, there's a two-stroke motorbike going past. As part of the information they have released, though, they did reveal that, in fact, the issue could affect any desktop processor of the two affected generations that consumes 65 watts or more of power, which explains why it looked like it was the super high-end K-series ones, but other people were reporting maybe other models were also affected. So it doesn't look great for Intel, but I'm not really sure. We don't have any firm numbers as to how many people have actually genuinely experienced achy breaky processors. And if this can put a lid on things, well, we talked before about what Intel's liability might be. This will help, but surely it's not going to put a lid on the matter.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, the problem isn't so much Intel's as the PC manufacturers that distributed these machines. And I see Lee nodding his head there because there's a PC retailer who distributes machines occasionally. I suspect he's got views. Go on, Lee.
No, you're absolutely bob on, Barry, because certainly in the UK with UK consumer law, there is a legal shield around manufacturers when these sorts of things happened. So, if you are listening to this and you have got one of these Goose CPUs, which is crashing your system, I guess you won't know until the micro patch comes out whether it's permanently goosed or not. But if you find it is, what do you do? Because consumer law in the UK says you go back to your vendor. So that could be people like me to your high street retailers like Currys, OEMs online, or Bob in the car park, whoever you bought it from. Intel doesn't come into the equation. It's up for your vendor to deal with Intel. And let's put it this way, that Intel don't tend to listen to me when I tell them they've got a broken processor. So, let's say that Intel do the right thing and decide that they are going to honour some warranties here and sort of say, okay, we work out your processor is duff, we're going to ship you a new one. There's the whole logistics of getting that processor changed, and who does that? So this is a very complicated thing for them to do. So if they can... you can see on the one hand why they would want it to go away very nicely, but hopefully, if there is a big problem, they might do the right thing.
And just to be clear, this is desktop parts only, not laptop, right?
Yeah, because it's 65 watts. So if your laptop's using a 110 watt processor, all I can say is you must be carrying around a very big battery.
Okay, well, that in some ways makes it easier to switch out a processor, but in other, this isn't a job the average consumer is going to want to be doing. So you're going to be returning these to manufacturers at the very least, which incurs costs. So, I mean, I suspect, and Roche will probably know better than me, but I suspect if there's any legal pressure coming on Intel here, it's going to come from the Dells, HPs, Lenovo's of this world, who are not going to be happy about bearing cost. Roche?
Okay, well, I'm going to throw in 2 cents and speculate wildly, having not seen any of the contracts. So look, Dell and the rest are sophisticated operators. There's going to be a provision, or if there isn't a provision in that commercial contract that would protect them in the event that those chips didn't work, then they can pursue that through the lawyers. So this is usually why you go through solicitors, right? And you would go through a big global firm, not just so that you're getting like best in class advice, but if they get it wrong or if they leave out or omit a material provision from your contract, you then pursue your law firm. And that's, I mean, before law firms pay for their electricity bill, they pay for their insurance because you don't have a license to operate. So one way or another, I would imagine the manufacturers will be covered either through the provisions that exist in the contract, and then they can pursue Intel, or there's an absence of them, and then they can pursue their law firm. Yeah.
And
yeah.
Sorry, Darren, Lee hinted it a moment ago, but is there any way to definitively tell whether you've been affected by this issue, or are you just looking for crashes and...
There is, I mean, you can't just go into your BIOS and say, is my CPU broken, yes or no? There is a test which has been recommended, which I think pushes your processor pretty hard, and hopefully will not cause it to crash. It's called the Robitech. I don't have the full details to hand, but I can post them on Discord if anyone's interested.
It's I have seen the Robitech fix. He's a YouTuber. Basically, you to do the fix, and it's not an official fix. You need an NVIDIA graphics card, and basically you install and keep on installing the NVIDIA graphics card installer package, and eventually you'll find that the graphics drivers don't install, and apparently that is an indication that this is causing a problem. There's also other things you can do with some of the testing suites to see if they fail as well. But there is yet to be a conclusive Intel approved, yes, we've goosed your processor app.
Okay, so just to be absolutely clear, in the absence of Tim, we don't recommend you thrash a processor to find out if you've got this problem. The hotfix, they've produced a hotfix, haven't they? But it's not out for the general public yet, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right. Mid-August, I think it might be in alpha or whatever.
Okay, so if you have one of these potentially affected processors, just keep an eye out for that. Not a great week for Intel either, Darren. They've got other problems.
Well, they do have other problems, but I'm actually going to put a positive spin on this. It's been reported one way round, but I think there's another way of looking at it, which is so Intel later on today, is going to do its second quarter earnings call, and ahead of that call, it's kind of run up the flagpole. It's been unofficially leaked by unnamed sources that Intel is planning to slash thousands of jobs in the wake of this earning call. The idea being to continue pursuing its strategy of increasing revenues but also reducing costs, which is business 101 as far as I'm aware. But actually, although this isn't great news for anybody who's currently working for Intel, and it's not necessarily what companies that are booming would do, it comes on the back of a fairly positive story for Intel, which is in its last earnings call, I think revenue was fairly flat, and it's expected to be flat again this quarter. And analysts are actually projecting that Intel's going to return to growth in the next quarter, which will be the first time in more than 4 years. So although there is some bitter medicine having to be swallowed here, it could be that I think we were scoffing a little bit 18 months ago or whenever it was that Pat Gelsinger announced that they were going to return to dominance. It is kind of moving in that direction. Yeah,
although, I mean, this is not for any great technical supremacy, is it? I mean, from what I can read, it seems AMD still has the upper hand in terms of performance, especially on mobile. So what gives you that confidence that this corner's being turned?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not technical supremacy, but it is sharpening up the business and making more of what they have, which is, an enormous installed base, unbeatable brand recognition, possibly, among the best in the world. And they do still, have all sorts of contracts and places that they can expand and grow. And at the same time, they've been doing, what AMD did 10, 15 years ago, and starting to actually. Yeah, I was going to say, because AMD split up into AMD chip makers and Global Foundries. Sorry, let me start that again. Because about 10 or 15 years ago, AMD split up into the AMD company that designs the chips that are now, barnstorming through the market, and Global Foundries, which manufactured silicon for AMD and anybody else who wanted it. And Intel's doing the same thing now. Intel is going to become a chip manufacturer for hire, which is, very much a growing business. TSMC has done enormously well out of making silicon for other people. So Intel has identified a potential new revenue stream, while tightening up what it was previously doing. It's not, it's not a massively disruptive innovation that's going to turn the world, the computing industry on its head, but it's positive. It's pretty solid. If I were an investor, I wouldn't be turning tail right now.
It's one potential upside for them that their manufacturing base is largely either in America or let's say outside of Asia, where at the moment we've got, these big geopolitical issues going on, especially between the US and China. God knows what's going to happen in November. It could be a big advantage for Intel to not be as dependent on the Far East as some others maybe.
Yeah, it's geopolitically, maybe a bit more, geopolitically correct, as it were. And also, I don't know if it's still happening, but there were some big incentives being offered by the US government for companies to move manufacturing, etc., into, the geographic US. So Intel will certainly have been benefiting from that. So it's just kind of smart positioning.
Lee, any thoughts?
This story made me really quite sad, actually. From a completely different reason from what you guys have been talking about, because you have to feel sorry for the people affected by this, and also I'm puzzled, and this might sound a little naive, and anyway, because I spend a lot of time reading corporate impact reports, and that's the way that companies sort of explain that their environmental and social government strategies, and I read about how they're trying to reduce their emissions, they're treating the children who mine for the minerals in their products to a new pair of shoes every 2 years and stuff like that. But the reality is there's still this antiquated notion of continuous growth, and that the only way to do business, the sale and share prices above everything else, is the driving factor. And firing thousands of people because you've only made 10 billion instead of 11 billion because the greed wasn't satisfied. When you look at the world at the moment, we need to consume less, but that doesn't compute with big tech. And this story that we're hearing from Intel and others like it'll just keep repeating as they try and find ways to slash costs to make things we don't need. Because, let's be honest, if Intel never made the 12th gen processor, would the world have caved in? No, of course it wouldn't. So, like I say, apologies if this seems naive, idealistic, or just plain nonsense. But I've just read a big environmental report, and 2023 was the warmest year on records. The emissions coming out of various tech companies have gone through the roof, and all of us are now so full of microplastics. I fear I'm going to shatter the lavatory every time I have a wee. So
I wonder where you're going there for a minute, I have to say.
Still baffled.
Yeah. No, all right. I get a bit tired of this, to make money, we're going to have to make people redundant because, we environmentally, we are papering over the cracks with this nonsense.
On that front, Roche, I was just going to ask, Intel, this potentially laying off tens of thousands of people again. Is this a particular quirk of US employment laws where they're allowed to, it's a lot easier for them to lay off that many people because the protections for employees are much less than they would be in parts of Europe?
So there's about 100 things here. So first of all, there is no US labor law. Don't know really why anyone would elect to work for a US company. If you have European companies to work for, you've got a lot more protections as a worker. They, without cause, they can just tell you to clear your desk if you're in the US. But actually, so so Lee talked about something which I think is really important, and it's this idea of the bottom line being a measure of success. And so this is where the bean counters come in. It's really easy to see 10 million is not as good as, or 10 billion is not as good as 11 billion, but actually the legal obligation is to promote the success of the company. And that's for the long term, and they're supposed to be considering all of the stakeholders. So in actual fact, it's an easy case to make. You know, in Q1 we did 11, in Q2 we did 10, therefore we're going to need to make cuts. But actually, it's more sophisticated and nuanced than that. So, like, you know, does it go to the reputation? The things that we know about reputational damage is that, you know, it will affect the share price. That will spook investors as well. So then the share price is going to, presumably, you're going to fluctuate if the business is like letting go of thousands. It seems a bit short term for me, and it seems as though individuals who are in a support role. So if you're in the financial, sorry, just by the way, so corporate governance is absolutely my wheelhouse. So there is no short answer now, but I'll stop myself before you guys jump in. So, so yeah, so what you have is, well, what is the business? So the business of Intel is like making chips and components for these things. That's the business. That is the bit that should be supported, and that is the bit that drives all of the growth. Finance, like HR, are only supporting the business, and yet it seems to me that they have outsized voice in these conversations, right? Because they're not like, you can look at financial departments all day long, and you can look at HR all day long, but they do not drive the business forward. The people who drive the business forward are the creatives, the business people, the people who are interacting out there in the market. So I have a huge amount of sympathy for everything that Lee has said. I think it's short-sighted. Where are you going to get the talent? So here's another thing. A lot of these people are going to be talented. They're going to be picked up by other businesses. And when you see that uptick and you say, okay, now we're going to return to growth, where are you going to get these people from? You know, so yeah, I think that sometimes our businesses look more towards the figures than they do to, and this is what is the context of the business? What is it doing? How would they expand? And then that takes us all the way back to the top. The point that Lee made at the first is like this continuous growth. What are we doing? We can't expand the planet. There's only so much. And we saw this happen, by the way, with Peloton, right? So, you know, a lot of people bought the bike or they bought the rower, but I don't know how many people bought a bike and a rower. And then once you've saturated that market, I'm not buying a second Peloton. I'm not going to race somebody in my sitting room, do you know? So it's like why they didn't calculate for that plateau of growth and then look to augment. And the way that they've augmented their package is great, but it was that burst of expecting that hockey stick growth all of the time without maybe not necessarily building out the people who could do that, you know, like hiring a huge accounts department isn't going to move the needle for you ever, you know. Anyway, I could be here all day talking about this.
Yeah. And we're going to have to move on before Future's HR department writes into Tim. So let's shuffle along. And it's Reddit, Lee.
Yeah, Reddit's CEO Steve Huffman even has declared an end to the era of free data scraping from the platform. He's called for Microsoft and some others to pay up if they want to continue mining the Reddit gold. Huffman has given an interview which has been reported on by The Verge. Now, in it, he is quoted as saying, "Without agreements, we don't have any say or knowledge of how our data is displayed and what it's used for, which has put us in a position of now blocking folk who haven't been willing to come to terms with how we'd like our data to be used or not used." So this is the case now, the business case for Reddit. So Huffman has specifically named Microsoft, Anthropic and Perplexity for refusing to negotiate, saying it's, and this is another quote, this is my words before Tim gets excited, "It's been a real pain in the ass to block these companies." So they've been at this for a little while now. Earlier this year, we discussed the deals Reddit has done with Google and OpenAI, which allows them access to the site in exchange for truckloads of cash. And to stop those that don't or perhaps won't pay, Reddit has been tweaking parts of the platform to stop web crawlers. The most visible example of this that you may have spotted is that Reddit results now appear in Google searches, but not in your others like Bing, Yahoo, Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves, Lycos, Hotbot, things like that we all use day in, day out. Now, Huffman claims that Microsoft has been using Reddit's data to train its AI, then piping the content into Bing results, which then gets resold via the Bing API to other search engines. Huffman also cited the recent comment by Microsoft's AI CEO Mustafa Suleyman, who said that public data on the internet is freeware. Huffman then went on to state that Microsoft acts as though the content on the internet is free for them to use. That's their real position, he says. And just to wrap up this little bit of the story, in response, Microsoft declined to comment. Perplexity didn't respond for comment either, and Anthropic stated that Reddit has been on its block list for crawling since mid-May, and they haven't added URLs from Reddit since.
Go on, Darian, you're going to burst if I don't let you speak.
Just Steve Huffman is such a disgusting human being. The way he stomps and struts around.
That is the opinion of Darian Graham-Smith, just to be absolutely clear.
The way he struts around as if he's built this enormous archive of wonderful knowledge and data. He provided a platform, and I admit he almost certainly had the smarts to get the people. Well, I mean, it wasn't him who invented the platform. Obviously, he's riding on the coattails of the people who actually started and popularized Reddit. But I mean, yes, they had the smarts to get users to give away the license, the rights to use whatever it is they're contributing. So I'm sure from a legal standpoint, he's in the clear. But just the sense of entitlement, the way he talks about it, the way he proceeds as if he alone, is the custodian of knowledge and rightness, while these other companies are, unethically trying to use stuff that they didn't pay to create or to generate or to license, when he's doing exactly the same bloody thing. It really gets my goat.
Well, that's a little bit unfair, I think, because when you contribute to Reddit, you contribute voluntarily. You know what you're doing. There is an implicit contract there, whether you like it or not. I think what so Rose might explode on me in a second. But with the crawlers, I mean, that does put a serious drain on sites such as Reddit when they're being constantly crawled by AI services. That comes at a cost. So even at a sort of very base level, I mean, Reddit's hosting all that content and it pays the cost of hosting that content. So yes, it's getting user contributions for free, but that wouldn't exist if there wasn't a company behind it spending millions of pounds a month on servers to keep that all live and hosted. So there is a cost to what Reddit does, and the quid pro quo is you provide your content free, they host it and serve ads and whatever against it. Where these AI companies are coming in and just sucking all this content out with no return, I do think he's got a point.
I think that's a better argument, though, Barry, than the one he's putting forward. So yeah. I think that like, if he was to say, hang on there 2 minutes, Joe Sixpack or Joe Public, who comes onto the Reddit platform, has been giving this information, and these were the parameters that they were operating within, and for you now to go ahead and then train up is an exploitation and goes beyond the reasons that, it goes beyond the purpose for which they were sharing it. It goes beyond, it's reaching a much bigger readership. But I agree, look, there's a lot of costs that are associated with it, and then somebody's able to swoop in and then take all of that gold for nothing. But I think your argument is stronger than the one that he's advancing.
Well, I'm sure Reddit will be along to offer me the CEO position very shortly.
There you go.
But when it leads, sorry, we'll come back to you in a sec. But Roche, just on he was saying it's been a pain to block these, and from what I understand, it's been companies. I think Anthropic got accused of this specifically, of basically ignoring the robots.txt position where you say we don't want you to crawl our site, and they were basically ignoring that. Is there any legal stand in there? Reddit got a leg to stand on if Anthropic were basically ignoring that?
Probably, but it would be contained in their terms and conditions, and it would go to fair usage, and it would go to. But I presume that they have something in their terms and conditions which wouldn't allow anybody either manually or to use a tool to scrape the information and then repurpose it. Yeah, yeah.
Go on, Lee.
You mentioned Anthropic, actually. I was going to mention last month, Kyle Wiens, who's the CEO of iFixit, he actually called out Anthropic on Twitter, and he said they're hitting our servers 1 million times in 24 hours. And he pointed out that in the iFixit terms and services, they specifically prohibit training and machine learning. Because he's a bit of a mischievous minx, Kyle then asked Anthropic's AI, Claude, what it would do, for example, if machine learning model, if it was a machine learning model and it found iFixit's T's and C's, and Claude responded that the content should not be used. So he's, I think we are starting to see this business model that Darian alluded to, the basically grab everything for free, then sell it back to people. There's content people like iFixit, and obviously Reddit is a bit more a bit bigger. They are starting to call people out for it. I mean, I guess they have been calling people out since AI has sort of been around, but I think there was so much noise and movement behind AI at the time that people got a bit excited at the magic stuff and sort of didn't really, and sort of tried to ignore what was going on behind the scenes. So I think we're going to see a lot more of this, the calling out of AI companies from various publishers. But it seems that Reddit is now going for this licensed approach to crawl its AI data, going down, I suppose, not too dissimilar to the traditional publishing route. And, the Atlantic has done it, News Corporation's done it. So maybe that's their way of prophecy, but making huge amounts of profit from all the gold that Darian pumped into Reddit in the old days.
Safan Sites on Discord makes the point that Wayback Machine also does the same hoovering. I think it's to a much gentler scale per website than what the AI companies are doing. But I guess it's a valid point in the sense that a lot of both good and bad web services, if you class AI as bad, I think that's potentially a little bit misleading. But a lot of services do rely on scraping public web content, and that, I think, we're going to, I guess it's going to get settled in the courts sometime in the next couple of years, whether that is a legal business model or not.
I would make the distinction that if you're using the Wayback Machine, say, for example, to find something that has been archived, then, well, first of all, it's very limited. The exploitation of the piece, and then it's the context for which it is used. So if you're using it, for example, because you want to quote, say, something that Darian wrote in a PC Pro, then that's one thing. It's something else entirely to take every word he's ever written and then to repurpose it, not give it attribution, not give it, not allow him to monetize it. So far as I can see, these are worlds apart, actually, in when you look into the detail of it. Yeah.
Darian's all right. He's got a fan in the background. He's got books behind him. I think we can. He can cope.
Lap of luxury, fan and books.
Okay, let's move along. And next one with you, Roche. And senators in the States are sharpening their knives for AI as well.
Yeah, it's breaking news. I don't think this is controversial. I think that this was on the horizon. So the No Fakes Act. I've got to start with a hat tip to the Americans because they have a singular talent for creating mnemonics that lets you know what the act is and then also lets you know what it is in the long form. So the No Fakes Act does what it says on the tin. It's no fakes, and it stands for nurture originals, foster art, and keep entertainment safe. And because this tickled me so much, I thought, oh, do you remember the CAN-SPAM Act?
Yeah.
And CAN-SPAM stood for Controlling the Assault on Non-Solicited Porn and Marketing Act. And I don't know, it just appeals to me. Anyway, back to the No Fakes Act. It is a bipartisan bill that is enjoying, as you would expect from bipartisan, it's enjoying support from both parties, which, given their inability to find common ground, I think should be more widely reported. So what does it do? The No Fakes Act would address the use of non-consensual digital replications in audiovisual works, images, or sound recordings. Non-consensual digital replications. And it would hold individuals or companies liable if they produce an unauthorized digital replica. It would hold platforms liable for hosting an unauthorized digital replica if the platform has actual knowledge of the fact that it was a replica and was not authorized. It would exclude certain digital replicas from coverage based on recognized First Amendment protections, and it largely preempts state laws. So the senators behind the bill balance the needs to protect the individuals and the creators. So this is what I found. I found that there are two camps of thought. So there are those who are for the act, which seems to be fairly uncontroversial and just merely an extension of existing rights that are appropriate to the threat. The Association of American Publishers are really throwing their weight and intellect behind supporting the No Fakes Act, which will probably surprise no one. They said this legislation prioritizes the rights and livelihoods of creators while ensuring crucial protections for free expression. It's a major win for the public, and I agree. There's a new international organization called Human Artistry Campaign. We'll leave them alone. That's a terrible name, but okay. Which includes 180 organizations across 34 nations, and they support the bill. So they were quoted as saying, from young students bullied by non-consensual, sexually explicit replicas of their likeness to protect the public's genuine interest in free speech, open disclosure, and creative storytelling. And the Act will do this without trampling the underlying need for real enforceable protection against the vast range of invasive and harmful deepfakes and voice clones. So, in the interest of balance, let's look at what the opposing side is saying. Or, as we will further, as we will call them going forward, the wrong opinion camp. You have the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and they wrote, the No AI Fraud Act creates far more problems than it solves. But then they didn't trouble themselves to explain how it creates the more problems than it solves. Unless, of course, they're talking about the problems for the platforms, which actually is just compliance with the legal obligation. And so when I saw this, I thought, can you imagine if we talked about the measures that we use for road safety? So we implement certain measures for road safety as a society. And can you imagine if we were like, oh, you know, the problems I encountered on Friday when I was hanging drunk and I couldn't get in my car. Like, you'd think someone was bonkers if they did that. Like, you know, we have guardrails that are in place. You're expected to conform with them. And, you know, they're there for everyone's safety. So they also wrote, this is the no opinion, or the poor opinion camp. They also wrote it has the effect of putting intermediaries that host AI generated content squarely in the litigation crosshairs. And they continued, all kinds of platforms and services could very well fear reprisal. Nope, that's not how you use the word reprisal. What they should fear is legal proceedings. If you fail to comply with the law, you then have to face legal proceedings. It's not a fear of reprisals. And it's not simply hosting images or depictions. We need to be really real about this. It's hosting images or depictions of real people that have not been authorized, right? So you can...
Sorry, Rose, just to interrupt, but maybe one of the things they fear. I mean, there are a lot of legitimate AI services out there that, for example, if I want to do an advert for this podcast, I want it to be in the voice of a 55-year-old woman. I can go and record my voice and then get that transformed into a different voice for legitimate purposes and not to try and defraud anybody. What they may be concerned about is that services such as that are going to be targeted when someone uses that to put Morgan Freeman's voice on or whatever. Is that strikes me as a legitimate fear, if not a reason to stop the act?
No. So here's the thing. If you want to take your voice and and push it out there, then and so you can have yourself doing, I don't know, like anything. Um,
Yeah, but my fear is they're going to come after the tool makers, not they're going to come after me. That the
no,
people
no,
who provide
no.
those tools are going to be legally liable.
I no, so I think it'll be the platforms that are pushing it out.
Right.
It'll be the platforms that are pushing it out, but we can't have you can't all they're looking to do is to make sure that it applies to non-consensual images, voice recordings, and depictions. And if you yourself have created it and then you've used your own voice to do additional so that you don't have to actually record it, you can just put in the text. So Descript does something like
Yeah.
this, right? The video editing, you make a mistake and then you can change it,
Yeah.
but you've consented. Nobody cares about that. Let's face it, nobody cares about that. What they do care about is misinformation and disinformation in election campaigns.
Yeah.
They care about, remember we spoke about this when Scarlett Johansson told told ChatGPT or OpenAI that she didn't want her voice used.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, the CEO tweets her, and she was in her the movie about AI, and it bore a striking resemblance. Now, given that there's more than Scarlett Johansson's voice, like he could have used James Earl Jones or anybody, but after she said no, he then went ahead and used her anyway. And so you have to be able to own and control your own brand, your own image. And it's not just for established artists, right? Can you imagine somebody starting out as a voiceover artist and they've got like, sort of a chocolatey tone to their voice? Well, if they can't protect that, then they will never be able to have a
Yeah.
career in that, because all they have to do is go in, do one reading of like a single book, and then all of the other books are just generated off their voice. And you can see how creatives and artists are going to suffer. I don't think it's beyond the pale. I haven't seen, from the wrong opinion camp, I haven't seen a good argument that it should. And is it perfect? No, but like nothing is. So, could it be tweaked in certain areas? Sure, but actually we need to do something, and I think we're already late to the table with pushing out legislation and drafting legislation like this. So get it out, protect the individual, protect the little guy, and then and then that's another thing as well, is that like platforms back in the 90s, they said, oh, they're not really publishers, they're just platforms for distribution. And what they did was that they were relying on a case like, sort of from 50 years beforehand. So they were saying they were making the distinction between being a publisher and being like a small bookshop. Well, like, Facebook is not like a small bookshop. That, whatever they thought back in the day when they were devising Section 230,
Yeah.
which created this separation, it simply doesn't fit. It defies logic, and it doesn't meet with the definition that we would use widely now. And so I think I'm all for the no fakes acts, push it through, and then course correct, but protect the individual first. Yeah.
James Earl Jones will be presenting next week's podcast, by the way. If not, it's a 55-year-old woman. Darian, anything to say on this before we move on?
I've been listening. I think Roche has covered quite a lot of stuff. I've come to the conclusion that I'm against the wrong opinions crowd.
If I can just on Roche's point there about voiceover artists, if any of you are watching this gold on YouTube, you'll see that over my shoulder are two plushy characters from a very popular YouTube series called The Amazing Digital Circus. And last weekend I was in Manchester with one of the voice actresses from the Digital Circus who voices Pomni. And the Amazing Digital Circus is done by an Australian producer called Gooseworks, and they are a YouTube-only production. They don't have any production or distribution company, and they are very much on please buy our merchandise from official stores to support us. And they talk about the dirty bootlegs that are out there, and the amount of content that my daughters see which is basically AI generations of their content, which is, hey, look at this clip from behind the scenes that's just been released. And basically YouTube are just throwing this stuff out there, and none of it's official. All of it is using copyrighted material to create something that is not real. Her voice is being copied. The other voice actors are being copied. People are doing songs, releasing them on Spotify, using these people's talents and stuff they're not being paid for, and people are thinking it's them. This whole conference, the convention I was at last weekend, there was just swathes of people selling AI-generated artwork, and the actual organisers of the exhibition were saying that you can sell your AI stuff, but you're not getting discounts on the table where you're selling it. We're making a concession for people who are genuine artists. Artists? I was going to say artistes, but it seemed to fall away. Basically, people who can draw. So there is this, as we just said in the last story, there is starting to be this AI, non-AI discussion, and I think we're going to, because of this act, I think we're going to have a lot more arguments about this one.
Okay, let's spare those arguments for another week then, and move along to Nibs, and we're starting with you, Lee.
Are you? Excellent.
Oh, no, we're not. No, well, I'll tell you what, let's do Nibs, and then I'll come back and do the full story.
I was looking forward to your story, Barry.
Yeah, go on. Do Nibs, and we'll come back to my story.
Oh, okay, all right, fair enough then. Logitech. If you're not cross enough by the content of this podcast, this one ain't going to help. Hanneke Faber, CEO of Logitech, has spoken of her thoughts for a subscription mouse, or the Forever Mouse. Now, to be clear, this is not a product that we'll see soon, or perhaps ever, but it's an idea from the Logitech Innovation Centre. She states that the idea is a mouse which is a little heavier, with great software and services which you'd constantly update via subscription. Faber cites that these new features could be AI triggers or mouse shortcuts, and she says that comparing the Forever Mouse is like comparing it to a nice watch that you'd rather repair over and over rather than throw away. And she was intrigued by the possibilities of creating a model around this concept. Now, we asked a small independent tech retailer from Yorkshire for their thoughts on the Forever Mouse, but their comments are completely unbroadcastable.
Okay, next one, Roche.
Okay, so this is a kind of a non-story. Burglars and the threat of Wi-Fi security jammers. When I read it, at first I thought, has somebody devised something that's going to block the jammers? Because there's not really a threat. So everyone can just chill out, relax, don't get too jammed up. It's unlikely to pose a threat to your home or any of your devices. What they think happened was that someone says, oh, they could be using jammers, and then some enterprising journalist. So if you've seen this story making the rounds, do yourself a favor, scroll on.
Okay, oh, that's fairly comprehensive. Our third story this week is, which I assume is a legitimate problem with Secure Boot, the system that Windows uses to ensure that you're booting the genuine operating system, not something nefarious. Apparently, researchers discovered that more than 200 devices sold by companies such as Acer, Dell, Gigabyte, Intel, Supermicro have potentially been compromised because they were using a cryptographic key that was basically compromised in 2022, and there's now a GitHub repository showing the keys that have been breached. I don't think there's been any comment from the companies involved, so this may be one that we need to keep an eye on in weeks to come. And talking of things that we're going to need to keep an eye on, this could be a potentially big one tomorrow, which is the fourth story I inconveniently clicked over, which is DigiCert. Now, this has been rambling on for the past few days, but DigiCert is one of these companies that produces SLL and TLS certificates for companies, so that you basically know that the website you're visiting is actually the website you're visiting, not being put up there by some nefarious little... Well, I'll leave you to fill in the blank. Anyway, there was a problem with a number of the certificates that DigiCert issued. And there's a huge technical explanation for this, and I'm probably going to get it thunderously wrong. But it basically boils down to the fact that when they were issuing the certificates, they had to put an underscore character into the key that they were sending out to avoid it conflicting with others already in circulation. And what the system they were using to produce these keys basically omitted to use the underscores at some point. So many thousands of the certificates that were issued to sites are basically invalid. And what DigiCert announced, I think on the July the 29th, so 3 days ago, is that they're going to have to replace all of these certificates, and they gave their customers 24 hours to do so. Now, this is not a particularly straightforward process, according to my contact in the domain industry, whose company has been dealing with this round the clock for the past 48 hours. Basically, you have to reapply. You have to go into a dashboard, reapply for a certificate. DigiCert must then revoke the incorrect ones and approve the new ones. And this is all a fairly elaborate process that's far from instant. And of course, there's now tens of thousands of these out there that all have to be done like that within 24 hours. Now, apparently, DigiCert has backtracked a bit, and some companies have said that there's no possible way we can get around all of our certificates and get all these changed within 24 hours, particularly companies like utilities, for example, where revoking their certificates and basically not allowing people to load their web services could have a particularly nasty impact. Some of them have been granted exceptions, but DigiCert says it can no longer offer those exceptions. So this all comes to a head tomorrow, basically, where if these certificates haven't been revoked and reissued by tomorrow, they will effectively stop websites and web services working. They will have what we've seen before, where certificate failures and browsers are now designed to not let you access sites that don't have the correct certificate for very good reasons. And so from what I'm hearing, this could be a very big problem brewing tomorrow when this all kicks in. So if you're listening to this podcast on Friday and it's all gone smoothly, then this was a false alarm, and I apologize for wasting your time. But this is one that could come back to bite us in a quite significant way from what I'm hearing. And there's a lot of domain management companies out there at the moment pedaling very fast indeed to stop this becoming a major issue. Darren, any thoughts?
I mean, only that. Thankfully, your mum and dad, the bread and butter of the Lee's customers, etc., are not going to be having their own cryptography certificates in the first place. So this isn't going to be, it's not going to be a Black Friday where nobody can log on to Gmail or pay their bills or whatever. But there will certainly be some screaming and shouting. I can picture small businesses who don't have in-house staff, who've had things set up for them, could be in a bit of an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
Lee?
Yeah, so we do run a few websites for a few sort of very, very small businesses, mainly non-transactional, so there's not going to be anything too exciting going on, but I've certainly been sort of hauling through our list looking for this. So it just seems that this problem's been known about for some time, though, hasn't it, Barry? And it just seems that the trap is suddenly, there's this 24-hour warning to go, and it seems to have finally got people shifting.
Yeah, my source tells me that they are governed by a certificate form, effectively, that demands that if a certificate has been issued in error, it has to be corrected within 24 hours as part of their sort of conditions, the licensing conditions. And so in some ways, DigiCert's hands are tied, but it seems this sort of rather unfortunate error is going to create lots of nasty side effects. And yes, I take your point. It's not going to be the mum and pop websites that are largely affected by this, but it's the websites they may be accessing, and web services they may be accessing. And I'm by no means steeped in this area, but the management of certificates for websites and web services is a huge admin issue. So I think it's more likely to affect the sort of big companies who've got thousands and thousands of these certificates for various web services, and it's finding the 200-300 or whatever that it's going to affect. So hopefully this isn't a big issue tomorrow. Hopefully this isn't another CrowdStrike-sized problem that's going to hit the world. But just keep an eye out because it has potential to cause some disruption. Roche, anything to say before we move on?
Yeah, so just really quickly, so they put the S into HTTPS, right? So this is kind of a big problem because you're looking to this to verify and authenticate and make sure that this is a safe place for you to go. I think, well, first of all, I think it's a real shocker, not just because it's DigiCert, but we saw this in June with Entrust, and remember we saw Google write a really scathing blog on, and in a kind of a sort of a Spider-Man grandpa way. So, with huge power comes tremendous responsibility, and you have failed to live up to that over years of poor governance, non-compliance. Google asked them to go, and so it's not obvious when you see HTTPS, whether it's DigiCert or Entrust. Google went so far in that blog to say they distrusted them. So there's a world away from I trust you and I distrust you, right? I don't trust you might mean I don't know you, but you don't distrust them. Distrust is active. And that's what Google said about Entrust. Now you've got another CA, another certificate authority coming under fire, and it makes me nervous for the mom and pop operations who are going on and then relying on the S in the HTTPS, thinking, okay, well, I'm a prudent consumer. This is what I'm doing. And actually, if anything, it probably highlights the need for businesses to start to put kind of little logos on their things, like, the S is provided by DigiCert, so that when you go onto their website, you can go, oh, right, these are the guys who are in trouble. Maybe I should shuffle off and find somewhere else. I think that kind of transparency is now what's required. And by the way, I think these big companies have been getting away with, real cowboy behavior for quite a time, because you don't look under the hood and kick the tires and everything that you buy. You do your best as a small mom and pop operation to make sure that you implement the stuff that, say, for example, the National Cybersecurity Centre says do. You go, right, what do we have to do? That, great, do it. And then you find out that actually it's almost worse than not doing anything, because if you didn't do anything, you'd say, okay, we're open and we're exposed and we're vulnerable. But when you do stuff that doesn't work, you have that false sense of security. And I just think, me, I want to hang everyone by their thumbs from hooks for the most minor stuff. I just think I think it's bad form, and I'm glad that they're being raked over the coals, and they should do better. Just do better, people.
Just the final word on this. So Running Dak on Discord says he's had 300 to 400 domains to revalidate, presumably in the last 24, 48 hours. So Godspeed Running Dak and his overtime bills. Right, let's move along to hot hardware, and it's with you this week, Darren.
Yes, so since it's with me, I'm pretty sure everybody on Discord and everybody listening is going to guess what sort of thing I'm introducing. It is the new Netgear Nighthawk RS300 router. Now, what is interesting about this router? It's another Wi-Fi 7 router, which I think makes it the third one we've seen. But it's the first one that comes at I'm not going to say cheap price, but it's kind of a lot more reasonable than the others.
Darren, is this router actually running your connection right now?
No, this is running a test connection.
It's like he's shaking it around on the screen. I thought we were going to lose him any second.
Let's find out. Still there?
We're okay. We're like two.
So prior to this, if you wanted a Wi-Fi 7 router, the cheapest one I'm aware of that's properly on sale and supported in the UK, if you're not going with grey imports, etc., is the Amazon Eero Max 7, which is £600. The previous Netgear one was the RS700, which was £750. This one's 300, which is not nothing, but it's much more in the sensible range of what you might consider paying for a router, and it does still have Wi-Fi 7, and I think what they've cut out of it is very tastefully chosen because so the RS700 had 10 gigabit Ethernet for the network for the internet port and on its LAN ports, which is great, but let's be honest, even PC Pro readers are unlikely to be using that in their home networks. This one has 2.5 gig for the internet connection, two 2.5 gig Ethernet ports, and then 2 gigabit ones which you can aggregate to get a third multi-gig, to get a 2 gigabit connection, which I think is a very tastefully chosen set of ports. You can have some high-speed connectivity, you can put a switch behind there if you want to, but you're not paying hundreds and hundreds for enterprise type speeds. It's also got slightly slower radios, so let me just bring up the spec sheet here. The 6 gigahertz radio is rated at 5.8 gigabits per second. The 5 gigahertz one goes at 2.9, which is low for a high-end router. This obviously is a mid-range high-end router, but I think I kind of admire Netgear for having the boldness to make 5 gigahertz a second-class citizen, because as we move forward, 6 gigahertz is the future. It is what you're buying Wi-Fi 7 for. And so, it's got the 5.8 gigabits, 320 megahertz channel. I've been testing it this morning. I can happily get 150 megabytes downstream over it, over Wi-Fi. So, it will max out. It will saturate a gigabit home internet connection over Wi-Fi. So it's all good. What's not so good? Well, it doesn't come with any of Netgear's software freebies. Well, not freebies, because it doesn't come with them. It doesn't come with the Armor security service. You have to pay, I didn't look this up, I think it's about £70 a year for network security, and parental controls are extra as well. That's something of the order of 50 quid a year, I think. That seems a bit mean. I know this isn't their top end router. The RS700 does come with a year of security, but still, I mean, it's 300 quid. You'd think they could at least throw in a period of those those additional services. Many other router manufacturers include those for free. The other thing is, so the whole thing about Wi-Fi 7, the reason we've been so excited about it for so long, is its MLO feature, which enables you to aggregate 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz networking together to get the maximum possible bandwidth and to get the best speeds, the best reliability. When I started testing Wi-Fi 7 routers at the start of the year, we had a bit of a problem because there was no hardware out there that would no client hardware that would support MLO. Now, the latest version of Windows 11 Insider Preview and the latest drivers for the Intel BE200 Wi-Fi 7 card do support MLO, but this currently doesn't. In fact, that's perhaps a bit unfair to pin that on the RS300, because I haven't yet found a single router from anybody which actually will engage MLO. Many of them are advertised as having the capability, but it not currently being enabled. This one, the letters M, L, and O, at least when that joined together into an abbreviation, are conspicuously absent from the spec sheet. And in fact, they write, Netgear makes no representations or warranties about this product's compatibility with future standards. So if you buy it, you can hope and reasonably expect, I would say, that MLO will be coming at some point, but you ain't getting it now, which does rankle a bit.
It's not future standards, is it? I mean, it is this standard. That's the issue.
Oh, well, okay, yes, it might be that they're saying it's not going to run Wi-Fi 8, but that's the closest that they come to any statement about what might be added to this in the future, which is a pretty clear non-statement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything more to add, Darren?
Just that it's got a USB, only 5 gigabits, but it's got a USB port, which is nice. You don't always get those on mid-price routers, and, well, I mean, £300 isn't really mid-price, but in the context of Netgear's Wi-Fi 7 lineup, this is the affordable one, and you can, it works very nicely. You can plug in any USB SSD or whatever into it, share it across the network. It's just a nice little add-on. That's the main thing, I think.
Okay, any questions from the floor?
Darian, obviously it is their cheaper one. Do you know how long the software support will be for it?
No, I will. I'm pretty sure that Netgear won't promise a particular year of cutoff, but I could look into it and find out how long they've been supporting older routers for and draw an inference. The problem with stuff like this is it's probably there will be a gradual kind of slowing down of feature updates, and security updates will hopefully rumble on for a little longer. It might be that some big vulnerability is discovered in 2030 and they just cut off then. I don't think routers in general are the kind of thing, not like phones, which are now coming with, you know, very clear best before dates. I don't think it's a thing where you can say for certain this one lasts 4 years, this one lasts 6. But I will say, if you are buying a Wi-Fi 7 router in 2024, you can reasonably expect 4 or 5 years before you have to think about anything else. Hopefully longer.
So,
Okay.
and I'm just currently in a chat with Elmer N from Netgear, and he doesn't know either.
Oh, I see. You were testing me, were you?
No, I was seeing which one of you could get me the answer first, because I've trawled through their documentation and it's not mentioned. And certain electronics manufacturers now are meant to mention it somewhere in their documentation, and there's nothing here. So I just wondered if there was a difference between what you were getting with this one and what you were getting with the more expensive one, because that's sometimes a differentiator. But obviously, we don't know at this time.
In terms of firmware and software support, I would not be surprised if they're actually identical beneath the bonnet in terms of, well, as I say, in terms of firmware and software support, because they really, the interfaces and the feature sets are absolutely identical, except for what is included with this one, or what is not included with this one, and of course, just the specifics of the hardware features.
I have the official word from Elmer. Who says, as long as the product is registered to us and is actively supported by Netgear, it will continue to be updated by firmware, which doesn't really give us an answer yet.
As long as it's supported, it'll be supported.
Absolutely, yeah. Genius. And he says, but there's no time frame for updates on our products. As long as there are updates given and the products meet the criteria I have mentioned, it will still get their updates. So that's nice and clear.
I suppose they're saying that if you buy it now, they won't say after 3 years you can't have any more updates if updates do exist. It's not like you have to pay for extended service. You will continue to get firmware updates for as long as Netgear is making them, I guess. But I'd assumed that anyway with a router.
I don't know. Because I get asked this question. If people want to buy a product from me, I get asked, how long does this last? And I have to go, no one knows.
Yeah, good luck.
No, who knows? Roll a dice.
Well, as Retro et al. Sort of points out on Discord, many ISPs are still issuing routers that are Wi-Fi 5. So,
oh god, yeah, I got
yeah.
gigabit service from HyperOptic, and they gave me a Wi-Fi 5 router to go with it.
yeah, me
Madness.
too. Not from the same company. Okay, let's move along. If you're listening live on Discord, I'm about to set the poll free so you can vote whether that router, the Wi-Fi 7, what's it called, Darren? It's got a stupid name.
Netgear Nighthawk RS300.
That's okay. It's not too bad. The vote if that's hot or not. And in the studio, I'm going to start with Roche.
Known for her strong feelings on routers.
Can't see there's a pile of them behind a chair.
So I don't know. So can I sit this one out?
It's hot or not maybe.
Yeah, it's the first refusal we've ever had in 700 issues of this podcast.
I think what you should do is you should get an informed opinion based on expert advice. So
Okay, Roche, I'm going to come back to you, in which time you've got to go and find a coin to flip to decide whether it's hot or not. Lee.
Okay, it's a Wi-Fi 7 router. It's quite nice, and it's a slightly more sensible price. I must admit, personally, I'm not a fan of Netgear Nighthawks. I've had a few of them over the years, and they have all failed well before they should have done. Which doesn't say that this one particularly will, which is why I'm quite keen on what their statement is on how long things should be supported. I have to say I'm more like Roche. I'm not excited by this at all. I'm sure it's very nice, but is it hot? No, it's not hot. Sorry.
Well, personally, I think we're just too early still for this stuff, annoyingly, because like Wi-Fi 7 seems to have now been promised for at least 2 years. I remember going to a conference this time 2 years ago, and them talking about the hardware that's just coming on the market and all this, fuss over MLO is going to be sorted within 6 months, and it's not. And the fact that they're still selling hardware at 300 quid, which is not cheap, And there's still some uncertainty, to say the least, over whether it's going to get one of the key features. No, I'm afraid that doesn't light my fire. So I'm afraid we still have to wait a little longer for Wi-Fi 7. Roche has had a sudden beam of light from the ether and it can now tell us whether it's hot or not.
Okay, so I have a question. So, first of all, I can see why I would need a different router, because I've got like my work, which is confidential, and then I've got my home, and it would just be better if I could like segregate those things. Now, here's the issue for me. I do not want to have to get a degree in engineering to set this stuff up. I want to take it out of the box, and I want it like, okay, so this is your work one, and then this is your home one. And so then I can put like, my PlayStation and my TV on the pink one and then on the blue one. So here's my question. Can you do that? And is it easy?
Yes, so I was just looking for. I can't find it, but at the moment, but because I tore the box open so eagerly, threw the contents all over the place. But I found the French and German version. You get just a single sheet in the box which tells you how to download the app, which walks you through all the setup and so on. It is gloriously easy to get started with in a way which, to be honest, is entirely at odds with the technical capabilities and the intended market, I would imagine.
Okay, so then I'm going to give it a hot. But also, if anyone's listening and they want to know whether something's easy to deploy and use, let me play with it. Because if it's difficult, I will find that difficulty.
I should say that all Netgear routers and indeed meshes for the past several years have had the same app, and in fact most routers now will have a out-the-box app-based setup where you just kind of scan a QR code, and it's very impressive really how far we've come in. I mean, I guess I'm thinking back 10 plus years to the bad old days of trying to find the IP address and then log into it in the browser, etc. But nowadays that particular aspect of home networking isn't something you need to feel too intimidated by. There were some people on Discord asking how it works in the bathroom, and of course, with every standalone router, bathroom performance is a tough test. I don't really, as I said, watch Netflix in the bath, but it is the furthest part of the Graham Smith estate. It's through a couple of walls, etc. So it gives you an idea of how relatively the relative projection of different routers. This one did it all right. It gave me a maximum of 15.8 megabytes a second downstream, which is fine for a router of this kind of size and price. But because MLO isn't working, when I tried to put it in standard, what's it called, Smart Connect mode, where you just have one SSID and it picks its own band, rather than cleverly combining like the 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz, it just fell down to 2 gigahertz and my speed plummeted to 3 megabytes a second, which is still enough to watch, I think, HD streaming. But there are other things out there. I've got my spreadsheet in front of me that will give you like 20, 30 megabytes a second, if that's what you need.
Okay, Darren, so are you hot or not on this thing?
I was really excited by the idea of a fully functional Wi-Fi 7 router for a price that I could actually recommend, but it's exactly as functional as all the other ones at the moment. I do have a dialogue going with Netgear to see if we can coax some MLO performance out of it, or at least get a date for when it might be coming, but they haven't committed to anything yet. Maybe Lee could ask Elon or whoever it was he was talking to. And so I've got to say I'm a little bit disappointed. I mean, I don't want to I literally unboxed this morning. There's a proper full test and review coming in next month's PC Pro. It might be that I discover many more positive things about it, but for now I feel a little bit like, as you say, we've been exactly in this place for like a year and nothing's really moved on. The one positive thing is, Barry, you were saying like 18 months ago it was really annoying that we'd just got Wi-Fi 6E and now we're expected to replace it with Wi-Fi 7. It looks like Wi-Fi 6E is having a rather longer life than you may have anticipated at the time. But yeah, not to prejudge the review. I think my initial impression is, I'm afraid, not quite hot.
I almost changed my vote when you were leaning on it a minute ago, like you were leaning out of a car window. That's the first router I've ever seen capable of supporting that kind of
That's true, actually,
infrastructure.
because Black Ears on Discord has posted. So the old until this generation of routers, Netgear always used to make their routers look like stealth bombers, and it was a very striking but also quite impractical and sometimes rather flimsy design. I've got one where one of the hinges is a little bit wobbly and it doesn't convey a premium feel. But yeah, now they're black plastic polyhedral towers, and it's a look.
Okay, well, Wi-Fi 8 is going to be out by the time we finish this podcast. So let's just quickly wrap up by saying that you failed to convince the hoi polloi Eva with 4 votes for and 14 against. That's a very low vote count today. Where is everybody? Is it summer holidays, or are they just bored to death by Wi-Fi 7 routers? Either way, it's a bit of a defeat for Netgear's something or other. Congratulations, Netgear. We will be back next week, almost certainly, barring anything nuclear. So we will see you then. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
All right, and thank you very much to all our friends on Discord. We will catch you on the flip side, whatever that means. Bye for now.
Bye.